Hey guys, Tarke here, and today I've prepared a whole bunch of beautiful notes all about 3.7 Legion and also about the substantial game improvements coming, focusing on the melee, but generally just combat rework as a whole. Just a few things I want to shout out before we get into it. I had the amazing opportunity to record a super secret Baeclast. Interviewing Jonathan Rogers alongside my co-hosts Rise and Octavian. Sadly, Noogie couldn't make it. And you need to watch it in full. If you haven't got the time to watch it right away, don't worry. Rise's editor Scred has done a very short TLDR version, which I'll also link down below. But make sure you watch all the appropriate links. And I'll show a few little nitbits from the Baeclast, but let's just get into the initial league reactions and everything. So, I've watched the trailer a few times now. The trailer is really cool. I'm just going to kind of leave it running in the background while I sort of go through it. Now, a lot of people are comparing this league to Breach, very obviously. And also, I'm going to start off with the positives, potential concerns of this league. So, when people are just like, oh, Breach 2.0, Ambush 2.0, blah, 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 the main thing which I think is important to take away, the fact that GGG is doing 2.0 style leagues is a good thing. Even if you think it's a bit of a cop-out, the fact that this gives them the opportunity to take past experiences, learn from that, and really improve it for modern-day Path of Exile is huge. They have the metrics, they have everything they've learned from that league and leagues since. I fully support more 2.0 leagues. I would be very happy, and I've said this before, if one of every 4 leagues each year was a revisiting. I am more than happy to revisit past content. I think it's kind of cool personally. So, on that note, the theme and the flavor is on point. So the whole concept with Legion is that you're battling armies from the past. As you can see here, these armies standing off, and you engage multiple armies, you fight them all, you collect splinters. And kind of like how in Breach you collect splinters, then do the Breach Lords. You can collect splinters, and then you can do boss fights, summoning the army. But you can summon all the armies at once, which is really cool. So imagine if in Breach your build was good enough to run all the Breach Lords at the same time. You can actually do that in Legion. So if you have enough wealth to afford all the boss runs, and your build is strong enough, you can be like, yo, I'm just going to do every single army at the same time. And that's really cool and will be a massive, reward for the build strong enough to do all of that content. So I think that's very cool. It's also a nice little thing, because this is armies from Raid class past. A lot of named enemies are being name dropped. It gives them an example to go back and improve upon old specific uniques, which they have. But it really just fleshes out the lore. I care about that stuff. I'm weird. Probably 10 other people do as well. If you're one of those weird, slightly smelly people who hang around libraries, you'll really like that. Now, another thing which is kind of nice about this league is it's all in-zone mechanics. Other than the boss fight that you spawn with the splinters, there's no teleporting off to other zones. That is a very fun, novel mechanic every now and again. But when every single league is go here, go into a portal, it gets a bit sort of drawn out. So I'm quite happy to just be staying in the zones and staying in the maps for a change. And I think that if we could have more zone-centric leagues for a bit and then alternate between the two, keep a nice little steady balance, thumbs up. Now, as I've mentioned a few times now, we're having splinter-based bosses. So while you're engaging and playing Legion, you'll be collecting splinters of all the different armies. You'll use those splinters to summon the final boss fights. I much prefer splinter-based rather than RNG-based bosses. It gives you a very clear progression goal. If you have the goal of doing the boss, you always know how far away you are. And if you're someone who doesn't care about that at all, you can always just sell on the splinters to someone else. And it's much easier than having to sell on, for example, rare beast spawns through bestiary, etc. Very clean system. Really like it. I hope we see more of it. All of the uniques we've seen, as I've mentioned, rebalancing old, flavorful uniques. They all seem very build-defining and powerful. This is always a good thing for fairly obvious reasons. Interesting uniques is interesting. Right. Now, while those are all very positive things, and I really like a lot of this league, and I'm feeling incredibly positive about this league, I do have a couple of concerns. Also, just a little, caveat I'll put in there. All the conversations I've had with GGG employees setting up like the Baeclast and all the exclusive stuff, every single employee I've spoken to have spoken incredibly highly of this league mechanic, and they all feel very confident in it. So as a mechanic, as a core fundamental mechanic, I am very confident in Legion. That being said, Legion does have some timed aspects. So the way that you like activate the armies, I can briefly show it in Ziggy's video. So in this still image here, you can see it quite clearly. So when you like activate this portal, you have like a brief timer, and you need to basically tag the enemies. You see how the enemies have different things like icons above them? These indicate like special item drops. Now, when you tag all the enemies after a brief delay, they then like engage, kind of like how in with ambush you like activate the strongbox, or the essence you activate the essence mob, kind of similar to that. You like activate the mob, that they all spawn in and fight you. Timed mechanics. Time is a metric to balance player builds. Octavian said this very well on a Baeclast once. However, we've had a lot of leagues which have used time as a metric quite recently. And that can be sort of limiting for certain play styles. So some people who are kind of like, oh, I really hate all these timed leagues we keep getting. Sorry, you just got another one. Most people won't really mind it too much. Most people want their builds to be fast, so this rewarding fast gameplay rewards good gameplay. Also, a large point of 3.7 is making Path Exile feel smoother and cleaner and more responsive. So that should make everything just feel smoother, cleaner, and more responsive. So if it happens to be a bit faster, it kind of evens out. Now, the main issue I have with this, however, is the actual tagging of the enemies. We don't know exactly how it'll work. Like, for example, if I was to do an Essence Drain Contagion, because the enemies don't die, would the Essence Drain Contagion spread across the entire pack? Would dots proc them? Would they not proc them? Would RF? We don't know. My first thought when I saw this, though, was, wow, Tornado Shot would be very good at this, because you fire Tornado Shot once and you instantly activate the entire pack. That seems very good than walking around slowly, like hitting 5 enemies at a time, chipping away. So I'm slightly worried about the activation of enemies. Also, on that note, PoE has a tendency to be easier the more enemies are on a screen. So, for example, you see a lot of like gotta go fast clear speed builds, which use stuff like Val Breach to instantly blow up bosses. It seems a bit counterintuitive to me that you want to spawn as many enemies as possible for the most XP and the most loot drops, but also the more enemies you're spawning in a very tacked like pack like this, if they all spawn at the same time, we don't know if they like trickle enough, if it's all at once. Just like one well placed like on depth explosion would just wipe out the entire pack. So it will kind of depend on how they spawn in, and that's just something to maybe think about when it comes to designing builds for 3.7. Any build which has very strong chain reactions will be very good. Thankfully, Occultist hasn't been seeing much play recently, so this could be a nice thing for that. We do know there will be guaranteed Ascendancy reworks to Gladiator. Gladiator bleed explosions could be very, very powerful with this league mechanic. Right. Moving on from there. This is a fairly static gameplay loop. That isn't a bad thing. It's just, it means that you might get bored of it. The core fundamental gameplay looks incredibly enjoyable. This looks very, very fun. I think the best way to compare it would be like Incursion. When Incursion launched, we all had like, this is the best league ever, this feels amazing. But then after about a month and a half, we kind of just got a bit like, okay, it's not changing, it's a bit stale. Legion, I think this will depend on what we want from a league. If we have the thought process that every league should be 3 months of fun, disposable content, and not every single league should go into the core game, I think this is the perfect way to design leagues. This is fun, it's engaging, it's easy to understand. You have like 2 or 3 of these like simple leagues, which are just there to have fun, and then the more impactful go core leagues later on. If we're taking that approach, great. If we're taking the approach that GG sort of skirts of every league must go core, then this might be a little too simple. But personally, I'm very much looking forward to this. Now, as this has been having many comparisons to Breach, one of the main issues we saw with Breach League was when Breach would spawn in bad layout. So you know how when you had a sewer and half of your Breach would get lost into walls? When it comes to enclosed maps and layouts, will there be any intelligent army spawning? So for example, if there's like a sewer layout, will we get only one row of troops and they'll just be in a really long line? Will half of them not spawn, or will they be grouped up in certain ways? Yeah, we'll just have to see how this favors certain layouts. That might be a slight issue. Now, one of the very cool new mechanics, in my opinion, is called Incubation, which they show off in here somewhere. Now, the way that Incubation works is... they show it later on, sorry. You basically get these eggs, so to speak, that you put in your gear, and they'll have like a kill count on them. So like when you kill 5,000 enemies, it drops this particular item, like it drops uniques, or it drops like a Harvey item, or so on and so forth. Seems really cool. I like deterministic gameplay. I really like div cards. So my first reaction was, wow, that looks sick. The more I thought about it, though, so you apply it to your gear slots. So you apply it to your weapons, you apply it to your helmets, every slot. We currently have 10 gear slots in the game, and the different incubation eggs they showed us had, like, some gave you a reward on 2,000 kills, some gave you a reward on 5,000 kills. Depending on how the availability of these items work, and if we're meant to always have 10 on our gear, it could be kind of frustrating to have to constantly be refreshing 10 incubators with different charges. Some people love Legacy League Stones, some people hated Legacy League Stones, but the main complaint was the fact that you had like Sextants and League Stones with inconsistent charges. Apparently 4th row on the right. Maybe we'll just... here we go, yes. Right. So you see, drops after killing 1,000 monsters, drops after killing 500, 5,000. That's quite a big, like, variety there. So some of these will be after every single map. You're going to have to reapply your incubators. Some will be after every 5 maps, every 10 maps, etc. And as you can see, you get, like, a little XP bar that fills up. Really cool system. I'm just worried about having to constantly be reapplying them. I think maybe a better system might be, rather than us being able to put it on every single gear slot, is having a cap of maybe only 3 that we can apply at once, or just 1 applied at once, and like offset the cap to the rewards. I don't know. I love the system on paper, but it is a bit scary as someone who doesn't really enjoy micromanagement. I have a lot of friends who just want to map, and while this is a very good map-friendly league, and in fact doesn't make you do side things, you don't want to be caught up in like, let me manage my stash full of eggs, and let me go on Pee-wee trade in between maps to buy new things. It could be an issue. On the point, inventory management might be a slight concern. Some people hate inventory management. Some people are on limited stash tabs. We're having these eggs, and we don't know how common they are, so you have to manage eggs. And then we'll be collecting a whole bunch of splinters, so splinters for 5 different armies. Fragments, all of that stuff could be a bit sloppy. Another thing which could maybe be nice for the eggs would be if we could, like, queue them up. So you could apply, like, 5 eggs and they just, like, self-rotate through. But anyway, I don't know. So, let's get into the actual, like, combat reworks. TLDR, Legion looks very, very interesting, and I'm very happy. This will be summarizing a few points from the Baeclast. I'm not going to be going to any level of depth that Jonathan did. As you can see, he brought out the dev tools. You have to watch this. Like, even if you don't like any of the Baeclast class, just for someone who plays Path of Exile, there's so much interesting stuff in here. Really eye-opening. So, the combat / animations... Sorry. The combat and animations rework, in my opinion, is the equivalent of fixing desync. Combat will feel fundamentally different when you log into 3.7. This is going to be like that next evolution of gameplay. Friends who didn't like PoE because they couldn't get the feel of it, this might be what really grips them. This is insane. Like, this is big. So attack animations now correctly line up with their hitbox. So what I mean by that is I'm going to very quickly just show you this little clip here. So this is in the dev tools. So if I punch, previously in PoE, if I did a punch, there would just be it instantly hits the things in the thing. And it wasn't that clear. Animations often broke. You felt like you should have been hit or didn't get hit. And it was just kind of like the enemy would swing and you'd get hit when the axe was up in the air. And it all felt a bit clunky. Now, there's a very clear like travel path. So as my arm is coming forward, it actually travels and it will damage everything it connects with. So this isn't like crazy shotgunning things, but as you can just see, as Jonathan does the swing, you'll see the damage reticle. See? It comes across really, it's like spreading butter. You spread the damage through the pack. That is an example of the default attack. So there's no like old school single target name lock. Every single ability kind of has an inbuilt splash built into it. And this is like crazy huge. This is like fundamental. Pee-wee just feels different. Also, with this crazy new animation system, we now also have animation cancelling. So at the very start and end of an animation, basically when you're not dealing damage, you can cancel your animation by either using a different ability or by just walking. Even if you don't ever hit an enemy in Path of Exile, if you're just like a XP bot that just like lingers in groups picking up loot, Path of Exile will feel smoother in 3.7 because of this change. If you are a attack build, a spellcaster, a minion build, a support, every single build will feel smoother. I can't say that enough. People are like, oh, melee. No, every build will just feel better. This is insane. Also on that note, all abilities in Path of Exile now visually show the correct area of effect. What I mean by that is, previously a lot of abilities, their animations didn't quite line up. So for example, your Ice Nova would visually stop, but then still hit a pack slightly off screen. Some animations were actually bigger than the AoE and vice versa. They've managed to line it all up so everything is crisp and scales appropriately. This is going to make dodging enemy attacks feel much, much better. Much better. Also, just since there's been some confusion in chat, with the animation cancelling, you can actually use that to cancel multi-strike or cancel spell echo. So you're not locked into all of those attacks. You do the first swing, you can then move out of the multi-strike. You can move out of the spell echo. Spell casting is going to feel so good. Right. So not only is the AoE and everything like on point, which will make dodging and interacting with enemies feel much better, enemies use the same swing system. So there's a big section here where Jonathan shows us a 1v1 fight with Hillock. So, for example, when he swings with his right arm, you can pretend you're playing Dark Souls and you can actually go to his left leg, because it doesn't just hit arbitrarily in front, it goes through the swing. Dodging feels so much better now, and this opens up so much design space when it comes to designing boss fights. It's like crazy cool. Yeah, they've also done rebalances of all enemies to account for these changes. And there's more like wind-up time on certain attacks, and the enemies hit harder. Leveling should feel really, really nice. Now, on that note, they've also improved pathfinding and unit collision. So one of our concerns with all these improvements was like, okay, but what about like when you're playing shield charge and you just get constantly shield charge spammed into a wall when you're trying to shield charge down a passageway? Well, Jonathan brought up more fancy dev tools, and he explains exactly how it works, but I'll give you the short bastardized version. Watch the full episode for the full details. Basically, this heat map, this kind of shows the collision. So this like blue area, that's on like impassable terrain. They've basically tightened everything up and kind of changed slightly how the unit checks work, meaning you're far less likely to get stuck on random terrain. This should make a lot of abilities feel a lot better when it comes to like firing through doorways, or as I said earlier, like using abilities alongside walls. You shouldn't get like stuck on corners as much anymore. I won't know if this will improve everything. Like, for example, will like freeze pulse now be magically fixed? I don't know, but Jonathan said this should make things feel a lot better, and he explains in proper technical terms in there. It should feel really, really good. Movement abilities are also far more responsive and have more options. So we have new movement skills being added to the game at level 4. So the way that these abilities work is there's going to be a melee and a caster variant. They are unlocked at level 4, and they're like a short dash forward. You can see them being used throughout these clips here. And they have a cooldown. Now, you're thinking, uh-oh, but Tarke, if they're adding all of these new instant abilities, then won't we just need to have to use like 50 different movement skills? No. So they've added a sort of diminishing return to the way these movement skills interact with each other. So the 2 new movement skills added at level 4, they don't have charges. So they have a very short, like 2-second cooldown. And they share a cooldown with one another. So you can't use both of them. So you choose whichever the one you prefer the feel of. Shield Charge, Whirling Blades, and Leap Slam. The first cast you do has an instant animation start. What that means is, so for example, let's say you're doing your cleave, like you're doing your slow sweep, you can animation cancel the leap slam and instantly start leap slamming. Now, after that first leap slam, the animation speed sort of DRs to what it is on live. So if you were to just hold down leap slam, like just to say you had it bound on R, if you were to just hold down R, it would feel like live leap slam. However, if you're running lab, or you're just leap slamming every other pack with like a couple of seconds delay in there, it's going to feel much, much snappier, just like bouncing through. Or if you kind of had a system where you time things correctly, so like you leap slam, then you move for a bit, and then you use your dash ability, and you time it all right, skilled racers are going to move so much faster. All of this does is, like, for the average player who doesn't really care, the game's just going to feel more responsive. For the players who really want to, like, push, the skill ceiling that's been added is, like, insane. And it just makes it feel more efficient. The other thing which is nice about this is it makes PoE feel less mindless. PoE has this weird kind of thing where it's, like, it's very easy to just completely zone out and just run maps for 20 hours straight. If you want to do that, you can, and PoE will feel smoother. But if you concentrate a little bit more on, like, your animation cancelling and such, then you're going to be getting faster map clears, you're going to be more efficient. A good example would be any, like, MOBA players, for example. The difference between paying attention while lasting enemies and, like, sort of half-arsing it, and you see, like, your CS change at the end. That's really what you kind of want to be thinking about. Now, there's also been an introduction of instant defensive abilities. Jonathan explains exactly how they work and how they interact with armor. Armor hasn't been rebalanced, but armor does interact with these new abilities. They look very interesting and powerful, and we're seeing more instant reactive things. So it's the core fundamental PoE playstyle that you enjoy, but it just feels like a modern day game, not something which is being held back. Right, getting into more like general kind of changes. Substantial rebalances to all melee skills. We'll also see changes to other skills. This is the melee focus. Many of the melee abilities have been given scaling flat damage with the levels, similar to Double Strike. So Double Strike has bonus damage against bleeding enemies. We're going to see something similar being put in for all melee abilities. So what will happen now is the leveling of a melee character at the start of the league will feel much, much smoother, because you're not as dependent on, like, shit, I haven't gotten a good weapon in the last couple of levels, my character feels like dog shit now. You're still going to want to upgrade your gear, but it's going to be a nice smoother progression, and the difference between League starting on a spellcaster versus League starting on a melee build, it won't feel as harsh. So League starting melee in 3.7 will feel substantially smoother. Bleed and Poison are seeing rebalances. I don't know the full extent of them, but Jonathan did say on Baeclast that they are being changed, so hopefully Bleed and Poison will be in a nice state. We're also seeing new support gems for every melee weapon type. Staves, maces, axes, swords, daggers, claws will have specific support gems. I don't know the details. I'm hoping they're going to be mechanical based, not just like numerical. But I really like the idea of being like, hey, I really like the claw play style, so I'm going to play claw builds. Not just like, oh, I'm playing it because this weapon currently does the most damage. We have this very cyclical thing in Path of Exile where it's kind of like, oh, daggers are the best weapon for a few years, so everyone uses daggers, then no one uses daggers when they buff other things. By making the weapons actually feel interesting and unique, people will be playing something because they want to play it, not just because it has more numbers. Playstyle improvements like that is huge. I love that, personally. Shield charge, this is very, very important. Most important facts in shield charge now scales with shield damage, much like Spectral Shield Thray, which is apparently also improved. So for anyone who wants to roleplay Captain America, you can now do that in 3.7. And yeah, basically the final TLDR of all of this 3.7 is looking really, really awesome. Again, if anything I sort of half explained seemed a bit confusing, you're not entirely sure how to wrap your head around it, I highly recommend you check out Ziggy's very extensive video breaking down the core Legion mechanics. Great little breakdown. He also gives his thoughts at the end. And then for the actual like nitty gritty like mechanical changes, just listen to Jonathan. Jonathan is an absolute pleasure to spend time with. And we're going to try and get another developer interview lined up for breaking down the Legion mechanic itself in the coming weeks. So anyway, I'm Tarke. Tell me what you think about Legion. Have a good day. Bye-bye.